person, and thanks to those of you who showed up on the web today for this Live with the Zone talk with Mike Gibson. He's going to be talking to us about web accessibility and some design and experience perspectives. So Mike, it's your floor.
All right, thanks, Jeff. It's good to be here with everyone. My intention was to talk about web accessibility and some concepts, but also have some examples and some effective examples and some not so effective examples. And maybe what we can do is, if you would like the links that I used for the presentation, email me and I can send those links to you, so that way you can see and experience them for yourself, because the W3C has a great, they call it before and after effect of good and bad accessibility examples, and they've got several different pages. One is kind of a general news and information page. Another one is a ticket purchasing page. Another one is a survey page. And they've got the bad example and then the good example. They call it the before and after examples, but they have that available. And I think it's a great resource, because what you can do is you can click on the different elements and get more information on what it takes to make that fix. Oh, hush. That's JAWS. So I want to talk first about the general concept of accessibility. Some of you may have heard the terms, maybe Section 504, Section 508, ADA, you know, kind of those general things thrown about regarding people with disabilities and accessibilities. And so first off, let's clear up and say what's what. Section 504 is a federal law. It's part of the Rehabilitation Act that basically states that entities receiving federal funds cannot discriminate against people with disabilities in its most simplest form. And then to go along hand in hand, to expand on that, is the Americans with Disabilities Act, which has all sorts of provisions for different sorts of settings, but basically meaning you can't discriminate against people with disabilities. It's a civil rights legislation. Then there's Section 508. 508 is also part of the Rehabilitation Act, and it deals specifically with technology and access to technology. And it basically states that any federal contractors that are doing business with the federal government have to make their materials accessible. So it applies specifically to federal contractors or federal agencies. It doesn't extend out beyond that, but because the federal government is such a large consumer of products and resources, it's become pretty common that everybody kind of has sort of fallen into the adopting that 508 standards. To be honest with you, 508 is really old, really outdated, because the standards were passed 15 years ago. If you think about where we're at today with technology and the kinds of things we're doing, the standards 15 years ago don't even apply. I mean, they really don't. So there is a process right now going through that the federal government's going through, calling the 508 refresh, and they're trying to promulgate new regulations and rules that better reflect the modern times. But that's kind of the basic lingo of some of the things you may have heard. I also want to talk about one piece called universal design. You may have heard of universal design in regards to architecture, maybe even universal design for instruction or universal design for learning. But universal design is a principle that basically is what it sounds like. It's universally designed for everybody, essentially, or many different people for their use. And it's a concept that was developed by architects and designers and all sorts of professional people. And there's actually a Center for Universal Design at the University of North Carolina, Center for Universal Design. It was, like I said, originally for architecture, but it is broadened out. And if you think about it, whenever a company designs a new product, they start looking at things like, okay, who is our general audience? What are their needs? How are they going to be using this product? What are some of the safety concerns? What would be something to make it easier to use, and those sort of things. And the designers really go, they paint with very broad brush strokes, and they go for the average. I remember seeing something not too long ago talking about a ferry boat and that had capsized some years ago because the weight of everybody shifted over to one side, and the ferry listed to one side and capsized. Well, they went back and reviewed and concluded that this particular ferry boat was designed for the average adult having the weight of 140 pounds. And if you think about that, if you read the headlines and everything, you know that the average weight of an adult in the United States is much greater than 140 pounds. So it really calls into question some of our methods of shooting for the average. Universal design tries to take into account the characteristics of many different people. So it's very broad as far as the characteristics and the diversity of those characteristics. So an example might be, for example, a person who would be Hispanic, 6 feet tall, a male, say about 30 years old, and an excellent reader who is a visual learner and happens to be deaf. And all of those things would go into designing either a product or an environment for that individual. Deafness being one of those characteristics, along with, say, being 6 feet tall. So they're all taken into the equation of building something, whether it's an actual product, a physical consumable product, or an environment. And so that's what universal design is all about. Well, universal design can also be applied, aside from physical characteristics of, say, like architecture. It can also be applied to virtual things, the virtual world. And it used to be back in the day, that if you wanted an accessible website, they used to create a plain Jane text-only website, a completely different website called text-only, and you used to go onto the web page and it would say, people using assistive technology or needing accommodations, click here for a text-only version. So you are really developing two completely different websites. And, you know, they had most of the same things that the graphic website had. Not always, but most of it. And that was considered good enough because the technology was such that screen readers and other pieces of technology just didn't know what to do with that. And so really creating accessible content could be considered arduous, time-consuming, and difficult. But that's not the case anymore. You can create very dynamic, visually appealing, sophisticated websites, web pages, without having to go to this whole separate text-only web page design. So you're really, truly giving equal access to everybody. So the universal design concept can be built in. What I was going to show today was a couple of different examples, which unfortunately we won't be able to show today, but I'll talk about them. The first thing that I was going to demonstrate was there's a plug-in, an add-on that you can get for Firefox that will render a web page in text only. And I was going to show that to demonstrate how a screen reader like JAWS views a web page for a blind computer user. Because JAWS takes that information. It only sees text. And when it comes across graphics, it looks at it and goes, well, that's a picture. I don't know what that is. And it will either do one of two things. It will either pronounce it as a graphic and maybe even give the size of the graphic in pixels, or it will say nothing and just move on, which may be no big deal, or it may be significantly important depending on how the designer designed the web page. But JAWS will take all that information that it finds on a web page, all the textual information, and then it will develop an off-screen model. And JAWS calls it virtual mode. But what it does is it takes it, it organizes it, and it puts it in basically one column of lines of text. So basically it's really boring visually. It doesn't have sidebars or menu bars or any of those organizational visual things. It's just text. It would look like a plain piece of paper with text written on it, and JAWS starts in the upper left-hand corner and reads the top line starting at the left margin over to the right margin, then jumps down to line 2, starts at the left margin, reads over to the right margin. What that does, though, for a blind computer user is it creates consistency. So when you go to a web page, you can simply press your down arrow key and you can predictably get to the information on the web page. Now, what that creates, though, is a tedious, arduous experience, because if you think about the number of lines that go into a web page, whether you actually write the code yourself by hand, I think there are a few people that still do that, aren't there? Or whether you use a or whether you use a content management system like oh, my brain just went. WordPress, thank you. If you use WordPress, it's still writing code, but it's doing it in WYSIWYG, so it makes it easier for the sighty people out there to be able to see things and put it together, which is fine. But it's still, doing the lines of code. But if you think about that, that's a truckload of code. And sometimes JAWS has a command. When I go to a web page, I'll execute this command, and it will tell me the number of lines on this page. Sometimes there's 3,000 or 4,000 lines of information on that web page, and it's like, holy cow! That's a lot of information. So screen readers like JAWS, as well as magnification programs such as Zoom text, they have gotten smart, meaning they go in and they muck around in the in the lines of information, the code, and they start looking at the tags, and they look at the HTML tags, and they look at the CSS tags as well on the CSS side of things, and they're like going, oh, okay, well, that's a heading. Well, what level of heading is it? Is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6? Oh, that's a list. Okay, what kind of list? Is it an ordered list, or is it just a list? Oh, that's a section tag. Okay, great. Or okay, that's a paragraph tag. Okay, I can handle this. And then JAWS and screen magnification programs give you keyboard navigation, what they call single key navigation. So for example, if I want to navigate by headings, I can press the H, makes sense, H for heading, and I can jump down by headings. Once I get to know the web page, then I know, okay, I can hit H 3 times and I'm to the section of the web page I want. Or if I want to even distill it down even further, maybe I know it's a level 3 heading. I can actually type the number 3 on the keyboard, and it will navigate that page by level 3 headings. And so that gives me a level of navigation that helps me jump over a lot of stuff to get to where I want to go as a computer user. Or if I need to jump by paragraphs, then I just hit the letter P by paragraph. Or if I need to go by tables, whether it's an actual table of information like a spreadsheet type table, or maybe it's just an organizational table to make 2 columns of text look good on the page, I can still navigate by that. And JAWS, if you've tagged your pages correctly, knows the difference between a table such as a spreadsheet and a style table, meaning organization of text. So if you're using good coding, good tags to organize your information, as well as CSS design, the assistive technology is going to know how to handle that information. Now there's one last piece that jumps into this notion of dynamic web content. It's called ARIA. And ARIA is an acronym that stands for Application Rich Information Access. I think that's right. I always get the application and access mixed up. I can never remember if access comes first or application comes first, but you get the idea. It's a set of standards that can guide developers into developing or tagging information correctly on a web page. So that way it will behave in a predictable manner. As a user of assistive technology, you get used to the way applications behave in the operating system, whether you're in Windows or whether you're in Mac. There are certain accessibility features that says, okay, when you want to go to, say for example, a combo box, you execute a command to open that combo box, and then you can navigate up and down the list, and then execute another command to close that combo box, so that way you get the item that you want to select. And ARIA will help web designers to know how to tag items properly to tell the assistive technology, hey, this is nothing more than a combo box. Or hey, this is nothing more than a list item. Or this is nothing more than a checkbox. And then the assistive technology says, oh, okay, I know how to handle that. And it will give the user the correct information to be able to handle that. The best example I can think of is actually one that we just finished working on. Tammy Schmidt and I and the people with the degree tracker application. In the degree tracker application, there is an area where you can play with your schedule after you've decided that you're going to be an engineering major or a business management major, whatever it is. It produces your degree plan, and then it shows, okay, starting in spring 2014, these are the classes you need to take. Fall 2014, these are the classes you need to take. And on that window, what you do is visually you click and drag your classes around from one term to the next, and it shows you, what to expect from each semester. Well, using a screen reader or even using screen magnification software, there is no equivalent for click and drag. For the simple fact that you can't use a physical mouse. So I might try and click the mouse button, but I don't know what I'm clicking on, and certainly can't tell where I'm dragging it to on the screen. Well, we were able to develop some keyboard equivalents to be able to move from class to class. You press the tab key, and then to move that class around from term to term, you use your arrow keys. You can use your right arrow or down arrow to move to the next semester, or left arrow or up arrow to move to the prior semester. Well, after we developed the keystroke equivalents, we ran into an issue where JAWS didn't say anything. So it's like, well, that's very helpful that we know we're moving things around, but we don't know where we're moving them around to and from. But we were able to use, to be able to implement some elements of ARIA to tell JAWS, okay, this is where it's at. When you move, you're going to trigger on this heading on this semester. So that way when I press my right arrow, JAWS says alert, fall 2014, or alert, spring 2014, depending on which way I'm moving. So I know which way I'm moving that particular class. And that's ARIA. And that's how you're able to compensate for a very visual thing of clicking on with your mouse and then dragging it over to an area that you want. So I think that's a real great solution that we're able to develop, and one that I'm very proud to be able to have been a part of. So there are a few other things to consider as well. I've focused mainly on visual impairment, blindness, low vision, because that is a big part of it. But also web accessibility doesn't just end with visual or non-visual access. It also has to do with other disabilities. For example, deaf and hard of hearing people, and being able to convey audio information to them. There is the necessity of captions for that information. And there are some tools out there that can create captions. Some of you may have used YouTube and notice that there's that option to caption. They'll go in and try to use voice recognition to caption things. And if you've ever tried using it, it gets real interesting, to say the least. Or if you have a Google Voice number and it does the voice recognition message, it's kind of interesting that message is so far out of whack you can't even make any sense of it. So yeah, it's there, but it's not very effective. But there are tools available to be able to caption your multimedia content as well. The other idea is, and it kind of ties to the blindness side, but it also ties to other disabilities, and that is making sure that there are keyboard equivalents, not making it click with your mouse only, because there are elements that you can just click with your mouse only, and that's the only way to execute them. There are other disabilities, people who are using eye tracking software that have to have an equivalent to using the mouse, or people that use a pointing stick to be able to execute things. And touchscreens have really helped that ability out. In Windows 8 and other devices with touchscreens, being able to tap on items and execute them, because that allows you to execute it in another way other than just clicking with a mouse. So those are just a few ideas. The last thing I'll tell you, there is on the W3C website, there is something called WCAG, or WCAG, which stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. We're at version 2.0. And if you're really, truly serious wanting to make sure that your content is accessible, you can't go wrong by using the WCAG standards. There are several different areas for the WCAG standards, and that good accessible web page and the bad accessible web page example on the W3C's web page complies with those WCAG standards. It basically means it needs to be functionable, understandable, and it needs to be able to be used by a variety of different people with a variety of different abilities. I've distilled those down to the very simplest forms. I think there's 6 or 7 different areas for the WCAG standards. But that's the basic distilling down of those standards. In conclusion, you can make a very well visually appealing, dynamic website, web pages that are fully accessible for people of varying abilities, people with varying pieces of technology. There's still a lot of people using Windows XP out there and still using Internet Explorer 6 and 7. I can't believe it. I read a statistic that there's still something like 40% of the world is still using Internet Explorer 7 out there, which is amazing to me. So you never know who your guests are going to be on your web pages, and you've got to take some things into consideration to be able to meet their needs. Also, as we know, mobile devices are very popular, and with the advent of things like iPhones and iPads, people are using those devices, so you have to take that into consideration as well. And people with disabilities are using mobile devices more and more all the time because it's portable and it's the interface is much simpler to use. So anyway, that's my modified presentation without any examples. I'm open for any questions that people might have.
Hey Mike, I have a quick question. I'm noticing that the room is filled mostly with peers around campus who manage websites.
Yes.
Is there any tips that you can give us on, a quick tip on images and a quick tip on links for
Images,
the WordPress site that we use at Boise State?
Well, WordPress will take into account accessibility. Images need to be described. If they're important, if they convey an important message of some sort. If it's and now this is a little bit of my personal feeling too, and so I'll probably get yelled at by somebody who watches this webcast later on, and they'll say, you're wrong. But my personal feeling is if it's decorative, so for example, if it's a broken red line, don't label that. I mean, for me, because I've got enough information to wade through. I don't need to know that it's a broken red line. You might say border, if it's important to say that this area is in a new section, and say border. But if it's, for example, if it's a picture of a bright orange mailbox that is supposed to represent, click here to submit, email questions, then you need to say something in the alt tag that describes it, that says mailbox, or send mail, or click on this to send an email message, something that's descriptive. And if you want to add more information like bright orange mailbox to submit mail comments, that's fine. But the important part is making sure that you convey the information of this is where you click to do mail. Links, same deal. Make sure that the links are descriptive. Assistive technology have the ability to list links. In other words, I can execute a keep command and JAWS will bring up all the links on the web page. And that's a way of getting through things quickly. But if you have click here, click here, click here, click here, or just click, that's not very descriptive, and you have no idea what the context is. Plus, I think it's just a nice thing to do to actually describe, okay, if I click here, what am I going to get? Am I going to go to another website? Am I going to, am I going to go to a form? What am I going to get when I click here? So be descriptive with the names of your links, so that way it conveys useful information.
And we just do that by whatever's in the anchor tags?
Exactly. Yeah, whatever's in the anchor tags. And I got to tell you, I struggle with this too, because I write my own web pages and do my own web creation. I have to sit there and think, go, okay, what's the best way to convey the information that I want? Because there's a real temptation after you write something just to say click here. I totally understand that. I struggle with it as well, to be able to find good language, good descriptive language to convey the right information.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm on board with eliminating click here as much as I can from every website I see.
Yeah.
We're in a new age where we understand what a hyperlink means. I don't need to be told to click here. You mentioned a Firefox plugin.
Mm-hmm.
What is that plugin that it converts the page into text?
It's called Textize, I believe is what it's called. If you Google text only web page, it's like the third item in the list on Google's site. It's an individual web page that you could use, and actually you go there and you type in the URL.
You are currently using JAWS in 40-minute mode.
Gosh. You type in the URL and it will render it in text, or it will give you the option of installing the Firefox plugin, which obviously I like, because then you can just go anywhere and just click on it and it'll render it in text. I was going to show that, but I have nothing to show. Anything else?
I'll probably email you for those links though.
Absolutely. If anybody out there wants those links, just email me, Mike Gibson, MikeGibson at boisestate.edu.
Internet Explorer does not display the web page.
I will be happy to share those links with you, because I found it to be very informative myself, to be able to click on these things and understand exactly, one, they describe it very well, and so the concept's very understandable, and two, you've got concrete examples, and I'm a firm believer in having examples. If somebody can show me how to do something, the framework of how to do something, then I can just plug it in and go for it. I think one more thing that I might add in conjunction with web accessibility, in talking about things like learning management systems and those sorts of things, because obviously we're in a education environment, and so we're working in the frameworks of like Blackboard and Moodle and whatnot. Those basic management systems, the framework is accessible. They've done their part to make those accessible. Where the challenge comes into is when you're doing course design and course development, and making sure that the pieces we plug in are accessible. And that means making sure that when a student clicks on a document, that when it opens it up in the frame in Blackboard, that it's not just an image file, like a PDF image file, but it's actually a text PDF image file that's been tagged properly. And if we do that, then it will work great. Or if we have a list of resources, once again, going back to those links, that we have descriptive links of what they
You are
are.
currently using Johnson.
Okay, hush. So that's something else that I would just bring up as well as part of web accessibility. Making sure that we take the time that our content that we're putting into Blackboard and other learning management systems are accessible as well.
I have a question about opening links in a new tab.
Mm-hmm.
Does that cause any issues or problems?
No, actually it works very, very well. In fact, I rather enjoy it because it makes it a lot easier to. I like tab browsing, and what JAWS says, it will announce and say new tab. So it tells me, okay, I'm in a new tab, and then there is a key command. It's actually a browser-specific key command. It's not specific to JAWS. If you use Control-Tab, it will take you to the next tab, or Control-Shift-Tab to the previous tab. And that's standard in both IE and Firefox. Unfortunately, Chrome, Google is, well, Google wants you to use Google stuff, as we all know. And so Google has a component called Chrome Vox, which is a screen reader that you can use, but it kind of works in the Windows environment and it kind of works in the Mac environment. But really, what they want you to do is they want you to load Chrome on your computer and work solely within that environment. And the accessibility, the product development just isn't quite there yet for full accessibility. So it's not really usable. And conversely, Chrome as a browser, whether you install it on your Mac or whether you install it on your Windows device, Chrome as a browser, just there's not accessibility plugins to allow third-party apps like JAWS or ZoomText to be able to plug in and actually use it. So unfortunately, we're stuck with IE and Firefox. So that means I use Firefox. Oh, did I let a little bias out there? So, but sometimes actually it's rather interesting because the way Firefox will render a page and the way JAWS interprets that information and the way Internet Explorer renders a page and the way JAWS renders it sometimes can be completely different. So sometimes I do alternate between browsers depending on the page because I may like the rendering in IE better than I do Firefox. But most of the time I'm using Firefox. So.
Well, thanks so much, Mike.